concocting my cocktail right now. A little bit of Jack and Dr. Pepper because Dr. Pepper is better than Coke. Can you guys hear my fan in the background? Is it audible?
I can't hear your fan.
Can everybody in the chat hear my fan? Because if it's loud, because it's kind of loud here. So if you guys can hear it, I'm gonna turn that shit off. But otherwise, let's see. First of all, woo-hoo! What color best represents being drunk?
For me?
Sure.
The color of my cap, green.
Green. Okay, like a good winter green, are we thinking? What's the vibe? Let's see, because that's like a puke green. Let's there we go. Almost a perfect fucking match. And fair warning for somebody watching this, we will be drunk. There will likely be swears included. I mean, I never not swear anyways, so surprise. Okay, well, I guess we got a couple of fine gentlemen here in the chat. So big
Joe.
Well, yeah, we got Tehillim29 popping in, saying good to see us, as well as our pal Joe's Geek Show. He said, "Who is here? This guy." Listen, it's not a party without Joe. Boom. I don't know, just in case, I had prepared a shot glass, apropos Batman shot glass, for us to inaugurate tonight.
Well, and I guess I picked the wrong night to stop drinking Crown. I was drinking Corona tonight.
You can't get drunk off of Corona, man.
Challenge accepted.
All right, challenge accepted. Cheers to everybody in the chat. Let's inaugurate the night with a good drink.
Woohoo! Boom.
All right. So, with me being, we also have, Paul Baker joining us in the chat, saying he's got his Founders Porter ready to go. And JT Gamer saying that he's getting issues 38 through 42 of the first two issues of Gwen Stacy of Amazing Spider-Man. That's awesome, man. So glad you're collecting comics. That is the lifeblood of the channel and of my geeky after party life, I guess. I don't know.
That's not really why JT Gamer is buying the first two issues of Gwen Stacy, because he's not buying it for the story. He's buying it for the variant covers, probably an Adam Hughes cover, so that he can drink and probably, self-gratify himself at the same time, because that's why I buy Gwen Stacy from time to time. It's got nothing to do with the content of the story. Honestly, if it wasn't for Spider-Man, I wouldn't even know who Gwen Stacy was. Come on, let's be honest.
Yeah. I mean, there are some very valid things to bring up in this conversation. So couple big things before we intro up the show, because I've spent 3 minutes and 43 seconds being a drunk. First of all, if you guys haven't already, please make sure you're subscribed to both myself and the wonderful gentleman in the green cap. Will I point the right direction? Yes, I will. Over there. You can find the link to his channel in the description below and the big bad subscribe button below the video. Smack that like button because us small YouTubers get boned already. And we need as much love as we can get. And also, my last review on my Thor video is 11 views away from 2,300. And I would love if we could hit that because I turned 23 this year and 2,300 is a good marketing scheme for me to guilt you guys into going and watching that video. Also give it a like and all that shenanigans. We just crossed 300 subscribers. So I want to thank you guys. Love you guys for listening to me sit and scream and act like an asshole over the internet. So thank you guys so much for that. You're the best. And thank you guys for popping in tonight. Much love. And with all that out of the way and me being long-winded, let's intro this video up. Hey guys, welcome to the 41st episode of Let's Talk Comics, where myself and another co-host, there's the whiskey coming in, of the comic book community discussing one of the many facets of the storytelling medium that is comics, whether it be stories, creators, constructs, or adaptations. We pretty much hit it all. This week I am rejoined by my oldest, longest, most frequent collaborator after a week hiatus, the Canadian Cape Crusader himself, the Corona Crusader, actually. Comic Boom. How are you doing, my friend? It's good to have you on.
Great to be here. Good to be here, Dark Knight. It's a blast, and I know that we don't really have a particular agenda, which is good because we're just drinking and shooting the shit about comic books, maybe venting a little bit, maybe raving a little bit, and so it's kind of good. I kind of like it. I mean, you're the idea guy with all the topics and stuff, but I got to admit that just to take a nice break from work and everything else, and to rant and
have a drink.
It's good. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Hell yeah!
There's a lot to be happy about right now. With DC, and that we'll talk about, and certainly there's a lot that we'll find something to complain about. But it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And to everybody who's joining us live, you guys are the lifeblood of this show, and we appreciate you for popping in. We're on the road to 50 episodes, which is awesome considering how inconsistent I am. So that'll be fun. Once we get to that, we'll have to do something big. And as a little bit of an added plug, I have a challenge to my followers if they share my videos and get me up in the subscriber count. If I can hit 500 subscribers before August, as part of a big giveaway of many things, one of the premier elements I'll be giving away is this signed Greg Capullo Batman print, signed by the man himself somewhere over this way. So, yeah, that's a big thing. So if you love me, if you hate me, whatever you feel about me.
Well, let me just start off one quick rant here about YouTube. I mean, there's no reason with the quality of videos you're putting out, you should be hitting 1,000 in like 2 months easy. But the reality is that sometimes YouTube is, it's crazy. Like even me, like I've been at 919 subs. I'll get like 5 subs. Like today, for example, I literally got in real time. It happened. I got a notice that somebody subbed to me. Then immediately within a minute, I lost 2 subs. Then I got another 2, and then I was down to 919 again. It's YouTube playing crazy with the algorithms. I go to different sites and I look at my, it's just, I don't know why YouTube cares about small channels like myself, like yourself. But I do think that it's a little bit nuts when I can see in real time that, if I have 4 or 5 subs, I mean, it's not like I have a huge growth, but it's just really, it just sort of rubs me the wrong way. And, it's like I say, I'm venting a little here now, but I just get frustrated that, we're enjoying it. We love our channels. We do this because we love doing this and talking comics. Yeah. But it is nice to feel a little bit rewarded with, getting more subs, and we are, but when it clearly looks like YouTube is taking away 2 or 3, it just gets really frustrating because, you just want to, it makes me want to drink. Thank God I went to the liquor store before this.
Cheers.
But
no, I totally get that. There's definitely a big validation thing. And for those of you that have been following me, and I guess those of you who I talk to privately, I guess I'll talk about it now. One of the big reasons why I'm pushing the following is because by the end of the summer, I plan on finally crowdfunding my first comic. And if I can make any promises, it is that I'm not aiming, most of you know that I have very, very high standards for the stuff that I critique, and I have even higher standards for whatever comes out of my own body of work. So if I can promise you anything, is that I'm going to make the best comic I possibly can, and I don't want it to be a comic that is good for a first comic. I want to make a good comic with good story, good art, something that resonates with people. And I can't speak a lot on it yet, but the one thing I can say genre-wise is that it's a sci-fi kind of government crime thriller book. So it'll be a lot of fucking fun. And if you think anybody might enjoy something like that, shoot them over to the channel, because within the next month, 2 months, we'll be getting more into it. I have a really, really solid artist and a great cover artist. So it'll be a great time, and I'm looking forward to dropping that. So, all the love and support in the next coming couple of months are incredibly appreciated. But with all of that plugging out of the way, we have Chloe ATM who I assume is prompted by my title. Is Bendis really off of Superman? Chloe, if I can give you one answer, it is I hope so. It is just speculation. It is let me clarify. It is 100% speculation and hope that this happens. DC post Dan DiDio, their publisher, getting fired, has been interacting with Mark Waid. He had recently appeared on the DC Universe streaming service and has been in talks with them for something. He has also come out publicly saying he is doing ample research on Superman's back matter, who he's come out and said on multiple occasions is his favorite character. It's saying something. I think that there's a lot in these very small, subtle moves that are being made via Mark Waid in DC. I think he's definitely being talked to about coming on and doing at least a Superman adjacent project. Now, as somebody who hasn't liked anything Mark Waid has written in the last couple of years, I am also very, very, very apt to giving him a chance on Superman, as that is his favorite character. It's the one he cares about the most. And maybe this is kind of the jumpstart he needs to get back to being one of the best comic book writers in the industry. I mean, these are just my sentiments, though. Boom. How would you feel about that? And do you think it's a possibility based on what we know?
Well, look, I've been reading Superman comics a long time. Since I was 7 years old. My first comic book was Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. I was in 1976 or some date. And in any event, Mark Waid has forgotten more about Superman than I'll ever know. The guy is a machine. He's an encyclopedia. He's a walking Superman encyclopedia. And I listened to the interview that he gave. He actually gave prior to that. He actually first mentioned that DC. He mentioned it. He was in a podcast with three of his buddies just shooting the shit like we are now, and he made an offhand comment that how times are changing in the pandemic. And he goes, and he said something to the effect that, times are changing when I'm suddenly talking to DC editors again. And that was the first mention of it. And I knew right away it was because DiDio was gone. Mark Waid hates Dan DiDio.
Yeah.
Mark Waid hated Dan DiDio before it was vogue to hate Dan DiDio. Remember that Mark Waid worked with Greg Rucka, Grant Morrison, and Jeff Johns on 52, that weekly series. And then and Dan DiDio thought 52 sucked. He didn't like it. So Dan DiDio was going to do a masterful job on Countdown to crap down to Final Crisis. Remember that dog and pony show? And then Mark Waid rubbed salt in the wound by telling everyone what Dan DiDio was walking through the DC offices bragging that Countdown was going to be 52 done right. Well, Dan DiDio was obviously wrong. Mark Waid left DC, said he'd never go back. And now Dan DiDio's gone and Mark Waid's coming back. Look, we all know that Mark Waid he's a crazy. He can be a little bit crazy. We know that, politically he's been part of that whole Comicsgate SJW controversy. He's being sued by, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about any of that crap. I give a rat's ass about it. Mark Waid, I like him as a writer. I love his Doctor Strange run. I liked it up until Surgeon Supreme. I loved his Daredevil. I'm surprised you don't like his Daredevil, Dark Knight. I would almost think maybe you haven't read it, but if you haven't read it, you should. It's really good. I really like his run. He's had some misses, but my God. In fact, I'm going to be doing a number of topics on one of my topics that I have a top 5 that I'm going to be doing on good stories done at the wrong time. And a good story done at the wrong time was Superman Birthright. It came out at the wrong time. It received high criticism. I hated it. I was one of the ones that criticized it. I can go through a list of things I didn't like about Mark Waid's Birthright, but he has a lot of ideas in there that I think came out at the wrong time that maybe the public is ready for now. And this is 15, whatever. That was 2000 and I think was that 2009 it came out. Yeah. Anyways, but in any event, no, I'm DC needs Mark Waid. We need Mark Waid back. And quite frankly, I would love, he's a better writer than Bendis. He's more consistent than Bendis. he certainly knows how to write a stinker once in a while. But man, I got faith in him with Superman. Let him go nuts. If that guy's gonna go crazy and go dipshit SJW, at least let him do it with Superman, because at least it'll come. At least he's dealing with the character that maybe is aptly appropriate for it, as opposed to a bunch of dialogue nonsense that we're getting from Bendis.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that given Mark Waid's care and love and affinity for the character, there's no doubt that he'll be crossing his T's and dotting his I's to the best of his ability. And we've seen a lot of writers in pretty much every medium, have a little bit of a rough period and make a comeback when the proper motivation arises. And what better motivation than your favorite character? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Mark Waid has certainly written some of the greatest tales in all of comic books. He has a proven history, even, as much as, for example, Bendis has had a very solid history on various characters. His time in the sun was certainly a lot smaller than Mark Waid. And I don't think anything Bendis has done has really ever equated to how evergreen some of the stories Mark Waid has written. You'll talk to a number of DC and just comic book fans who say that Kingdom Come is their favorite comic book story of all time. And while it might not necessarily be mine, I don't blame them in any sense of the word.
And Tehila mentions Tower of Babel, the classic storyline in Justice League. And Taylor Pector writes that Birthright came out in 2004. That's right. Thank you, Taylor. Secret Origin came out in 2009. Secret Origin, Jeff Johns' Secret Origin of Superman trumped Mark Waid's Birthright, even though I think in some ways Birthright was a better story. But that might be an unpopular opinion, because Birthright was very controversial when it came out.
I mean, I don't dislike Birthright. I actually like Birthright. I will admit to liking Secret Origin more. Also, that Gary Frank art is just wow.
Yeah. The art in Birthright was terrible. It was Lenial Francis Yule, whose art I've never liked. And I actually think the art ruined Birthright for me, first and foremost. It was just lack of backgrounds, ugly women, ugly witch noses, unattractive women, unattractive Lois Lane. The whole thing was I thought was a sort of an ugly artistic mess, which unfortunately Mark Waid handpicked. Francis Yule. He handpicked him, but it was a disastrous mistake. But Mark Waid made the comment about Birthright. Years later, it was about 5 years later, when they asked Mark Waid what he thought of Birthright, and he's heartbroken. It's his best work. It's his favorite DC work he's ever done, is his Birthright. And he says that the reception he got to Birthright, he said he felt like he finally got to play at Carnegie Hall and nobody showed up. I feel real sorry for him, because he's such a great writer and he's written so many good things. But the one thing to this day he's the most passionate about, he's heartbroken that not more people liked it.
Yeah, it's interesting how that dynamic works, right? I mean, you look at a legend like Alan Moore, he absolutely hated the Killing Joke, and it's one of the more popular Batman stories, if not comic book stories of all time. So it's odd kind of how that dynamic works. And I kind of want to take that cue and go through a couple of these amazing people joining us in the chat. JT Gamer said that he's been using the Marvel Epic Collection graphic novels to get from Spider-Man Origins to Gwen Stacy's death. That's an awesome resource, man. Easy way to chunk out a bunch of story. That's kind of what I went through going through Ann Nesenti's Daredevil run. And that's a great choice, bud. Good move. Nerdy Blurb TV, big exclamations. I assume it had to do with me giving some brief information on the comic. Much love, my brother, and his follow-up saying that if there's anything I can do to support the comic, let me know. I most certainly will. A lot of love, man, from me to you. I appreciate the support more than anything, and I hope that at the end of the day I deliver a comic that makes people think, that makes people laugh, that makes people cry, that makes people feel. That's what storytelling is all about, and I love you 3,000. For showing me the support before it even comes out, brother. Much appreciated.
Hey, keep it PG. Hey, keep it PG.
My friend Jack Daniel says no. Joe's Geek Show. Bendis leaves Superman. No, give him a 2,000 issue run. Over my
Joe's drunk. Joe's obviously drunk.
Yeah. If the emoji isn't any indicator of anything. So Hillam says, like you had mentioned, if Didier was out, Bendis should join him, kick him off of DC Comics canon, and keep him on Elseworlds and Jinx World. Man, I think it's one of those situations where, because I know Bendis does teach, like he teaches in a university setting. I think Bendis, you take a break, become an associate professor for a couple years, kind of, because I feel like with a lot of writers that I've met that do teach, there's something about instructing people and kind of transitively learning some things from your students will help him hopefully resettle himself, because I think with the exception of like Batman Universe, I don't think Bendis has written a strong story in a while. So I don't know, man. It's a rough scenario. I like Bendis. I have 2 Omnibuy for his Daredevil run. I mean, we're drinking, so I guess we already knew this wasn't G-rated, but I fucking love his Daredevil.
Yeah.
And I love his Alias, and Ultimate Spider-Man is one of the only contexts that I enjoy Peter Parker in. So I don't just hate Bendis to hate Bendis.
Yeah, no, and his powers is good. I do like his powers. I got virtually every one of his individual powers comic books. I mean, so I read Powers from the beginning. And so I just got frustrated that it never came out on time. And now the irony is, now that all his stuff's coming out on time on DC, I'm actually more frustrated with him than ever before. But I gotta vent a little bit on Bendis because number one, I'm drunk, and number two, because I can. And I know that's why people showed up, was to hear me bitch. So here it comes. All right. So he was on the DC Nation page, and he's being interviewed by another guy who can't write, Sam Humphries. If you've been reading Harley Quinn, which I hope you haven't, you'd know what I'm talking about. Anyways, he actually Bendis, out of an attempt to show respect for the fans that are actually reading his Superman, which is a shrinking market, as we all know, for those of us who are paying attention. He suggested that those of us who've actually read Superman would understand what's happening. So suggesting that those of us who are critical of it, we haven't actually read it. That we're just doing it. We're just doing it to be jerks. We're just doing it. Look, I admit I drink when I read comics, but I have I can retain something. And that's why I put pictures up when I do my videos, because I actually forget what the pictures are. So I have to put them in my videos. So I do that for myself as well as the viewer. And I'm fairly certain I get it right, because it's there in black and white. I believe in evidence. Show it. I can prove to you it's legitimately garbage because I'm showing it to you. And you can almost smell it sometimes through the screen.
Yeah.
Anyways,
first of all, I mean, you put out some of the best reviews on YouTube for comic books. They're unique, they're original, they're honest. So if people aren't watching them, go subscribe to this man right now, please. Second of all, you're not wrong. There's a reason I like after Man of Steel 1, which is literally the only Superman thing he's ever written that I enjoyed. And I reviewed it early on in the channel. I enjoyed it. I've said it, and I stand behind that first issue.
Sure.
There's a reason I haven't reviewed anything after. It's because I don't want to let myself get sucked into just being negative, because I tend to be a pessimist anyways and garner that reputation regardless. So I try to avoid that if I can. But you're not wrong. There are structural issues. There's issues with characterization. He's not writing Superman in the context of his continuity, his history, or in the overall span of an interlocking fucking multiverse, not even a universe. There's certainly a negligence there. And there's an issue with craft. For as much as I critique writing, I openly admit I'm an amateur writer. And if an amateur writer can pick apart those mistakes, that's an issue. So I 100% stand by you on that, man. It's not just shitting on him for the sake of shitting on him, because like I said, I mean, we've talked at length about the things that he's done that are just transcendental. Ultimate Spider-Man is incredible. His Daredevil is incredible. Alias is incredible. You love his powers. So it's not like we're shitting on him for the sake of. It's just not sugarcoating things and checking any potential biases. I think, at least that's how I justify it. But maybe that's Jack Daniels speaking. Who knows?
No, it's not. I figure if somebody wants to get to a particular city, and I happen to know it's straight ahead, but they turn around and they start walking backwards or whatever the case might be, and I tell them they're going in the wrong direction, you can call me an asshole, but you're still going to end up in the wrong place. That's what Bendis doesn't understand. When you got sales that are going down, you got enough people screaming at you. maybe if you're in a room and everyone's an asshole, there's slight possibility that maybe you're the outlier. Just throwing that out there. But hey, it is what it is.
Yeah.
One comment here. Scott Snyder said something very interesting. He said death metal, and he called it the end of an era. Death metal will be the end of an era, and that after death metal, it's going to be more. It's going to be more individual comic stories. It's going to be less big events. Now, I know that Snyder. We all know that Snyder is somewhat prone to exaggeration sometimes and hyperbole. But I did find that was a very interesting phrase. That's an exact quote. He said it's the end of an era. So I'm wondering if after death metal, what are we going to be getting out of DC? I took from that comment, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, that we're definitely not going to get 5G. We're going to get smaller. I'm hoping character-based stories, individual stories taking place within the individual comic titles. And I'm hoping that's how that's going to go. I also interpret from that we're going to continue to get these little fiefdoms. We're going to get the Snyderverse, the Bendis verse, the Murphy verse, the Morrison verse. And I still think we're going to get that because I think what DC has shown, whether we like it or not, is that none of these fiefdoms are very good. They don't work together very well. It's not like we're going to have United Nations of creators in the DC universe getting together. It's not going to happen. And while I think that might be unfortunate, I think part of me is kind of glad about that, because that way we can all migrate to whatever kingdom or whatever fiefdom we prefer at any given moment.
Yeah, you make some very good points. And we've said on multiple streams, literally probably dating back to the loss of Dan DiDio, and as soon as Scott Snyder had mentioned kind of the ever increasing stakes of metal, that whatever 5G was going to be is now whatever Snyder plans at the end of his Dark Knight's metal. So yeah, I mean, there are going to be some big changes. I don't know quite what it's going to be, but I'm excited for change because I've gone on record many times, and I think you have as well, saying we haven't really been in love with DC for the last couple of years. They've been making some mistakes. I think just on a content level, and it's a shame because they clearly have the talent. When we did plug our video on drafting Marvel creators or DC creators over to Marvel, we realized how much pure talent there was over at DC that just is not being well utilized where they are now. And it's a shame because there are talented, creative people over there that can write and draw some really kick-ass stories. And when you're not, when you have the Yankees roster, from say maybe the Derek Jeter, Alex Rodriguez years, and you're not winning championships, there's an issue. You know what I'm saying? So, that I think is a big problem. And I'm hoping there's some editorial kind of restructuring, because I think the end of one big thing is that I believe that there should be an end of total creative freedom. They had Bendis as their hot shot who gets to do whatever he wants. The editor clearly isn't really doing anything, and I know who the editor is, and I'm not going to say anything for the sake of remaining somewhat professional.
No.
I got to protect a potential career here, my friend. And it's a damn shame that there's a compromise of quality because of name. I think it's a damn shame. And the one thing I'll give, Jesus Christ, I sound like I'm running for president. But the one thing I'll tell you, man, is if I ever make it into a high editorial position at a comic book publisher, it's going to be quality over anything. And I know there are business decisions to make, but goddamn, when the Bendis name doesn't really sell books anymore, you can't bank on it. So at that point, when do you stop looking at name and go towards quality, which I feel like should have been done anyways as a fan, and as somebody who looks up to these creators, who wants to learn from them and become better by their stories. But I don't know. That's just me. The next we're getting pretty far back in these comments. Taylor Pector just saying, "Hey man, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Sorry if you joined in on the peak of a rant, but I thank you for popping in, man. I'm looking forward to seeing what you might be adding to the conversation, as you always do." Paul Baker, if DC got Greg Rucka back, Waid is definitely a possibility, and I think. Comic Boom here really gave some solid grounding to that. Not to mention, I think one question to ask is, even though Brubaker has said that he doesn't really want to go back to Big Two work, is there a potential now? Because his big beef with DC was DiDio. And for those who have been watching the channel, everybody knows that I often have wet dreams about Ed Brubaker going back on Batman or Detective Comics. So can we get it? I don't know. Like, Boom, I know we had talked about this briefly when we had our stream, I believe, on your channel. Everybody go check it out. When DiDio had left. Do you think there might be a potential of obviously we've talked about Waid, but maybe other creators that DiDio might not have had a great rapport with coming back to DC?
Well, that's an open question. I don't, obviously, I just don't know. I've not heard the Waid DiDio dispute is well documented. It goes back a decade at least, if not longer. And but I don't know. I mean, who knows? If I think unlike Mark Waid is a little different than some other creators. I think most creators have more tact than Mark Waid, and I say that lovingly because I do respect Mark Waid as a creator, but I think he does have a tendency to maybe shoot his mouth off when he should remain silent. And I don't know. I mean, I've heard rumors about Brubaker having issues with DiDio. I've heard other rumors of other certain creators having issues with DiDio. I personally, I would love that. I would love to see some creators come back, unless it was all lip service. I thought most people generally got along with DiDio. He seems to be. I always thought he was more of a likable guy. Most people in the industry actually liked him. But I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. I'm really disturbed by the fact that you have wet dreams over Detective Comics.
Listen, I'm hanging out with you and my good friend Jack Daniels, and sometimes there are dark secrets that come out under those occasions. Eventually we'll probably put those behind a paywall to limit who sees those things, but they're here now, so enjoy them while you got them. Taylor Pector coming back in saying that his Black Widow, who I assume was back when we were talking about Samney, because Waid, because we're super far behind on the chat because I'm a long-winded motherfucker, he believes is fantastic. And I'm glad to hear it because that's something that I think is worth checking out. And I know, Boom, you said you like his Daredevil run.
I've got his. I do have Mark Waid's Black Widow run digitally with Chris Samney, and it's really good. It's 12 issues long. And it's really good. It's just a nice short espionage tale. I mean, and the other thing to say about Mark Waid here is, Mark Waid has done himself an injustice by shooting his mouth off like he often does, and he's gotten bad press. But the reality is that the guy knows how to write, and he's different things to different people, and he's got a lot of respect by a lot of writers, and he's taken the bullet for a lot of people in the industry. And again, I can't defend Mark Waid and everything that I think he's the author of his own misfortune in many aspects of how he's conducted himself on social media. However, I don't care. I don't care. To me, it'll be like I'll be like a Trump supporter. I don't care if he's an asshole. I don't care if he's completely devoid of any self-respect and he's a piece of walking human garbage. I don't care. The guy can write. As long as the economy is going strong and the comic books are selling, who cares, right?
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah. No. I'll refrain from any politics, but I get the notion for sure. Cool. Well, that's a good recommendation from Taylor and Comic Boom. Go check out the Black Widow run by Mark Waid and Chris Samney. Got some Okie dude saying, "What's up, brother? Good to see you." Quick shout out, some Okie man. He has been a ride or die for my channel literally since the beginning. One of the first viewers to actively really engage in my stuff, and especially while I'm drunk, I want to make sure it goes well noticed that I appreciate you. Thank you for being an avid viewer of my channel and for participating all the time. And I know he's kind of done the same over on your channel as well, Boom. So at bare minimum, I want to say thank you.
I want to give a shout out to Helium29. I did get your message on Twitter to Helium, and I know I like Helium's comment. I can tell when Bendis' storytelling is as shallow as a toilet, not as deep as an ocean that he thinks it is. And I agree with Tehillim's comment when he says that about Bendis. Tehillim is like me. I'm with, I do a live stream with Tehillim on Fortress of Attitude, where we routinely complain about the aging up of John Kent. And we often find ourselves in a fit of depression, ranting about what could have been had Bendis not come to DC. But it is what it is. Go ahead.
And I saw he had put in earlier chat in the live stream about me coming on to his live streams, man. Just shoot me a DM on Twitter or whatever, and we'll talk about some things and maybe hash something out. Who knows? But continue, my friend.
I got our next topic, because I want to talk about Harley Quinn, the whole nonsense about her having a relationship with Poison Ivy or Booster Gold or what have you, whatever. I mean, first of all, as somebody, if I'm going to have a wet dream, I want to have a wet dream of a lesbian, between lesbianism between Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy. What's this Booster Gold crap? Guess who had that stupid idea? Sam Humphries. Who did Sam Humphries recently have a conversation with? Bendis. So now we aged up John Kent. We were in that. Now we got Harley with Booster Gold. What's going on here? And no, it gets worse.
Quick thing. I'm just gonna say something real quick. Continue on your rant. I'm gonna get more ice for my cocktail. So
I will
rant away.
Okay, so here we go. Now, what Sam Humphries said on his chat with, he was actually interviewed. He said that the reason why he came up with an idea for putting together Booster Gold and Harley Quinn, because when he read Heroes in Crisis, he said that when he first saw the first issue of Heroes in Crisis, and he read it, Tom King wrote it, and he read it before it was released. And he thought that Tom King was going to pull a fast one. And apparently Sam Humphries saw that he saw chemistry between Booster Gold and Harley Quinn. I mean, they beat the hell out of each other in the first issues of Heroes in Crisis, if you remember that abortion. And he decided that, well, I guess he was the only one that saw it, but he decided he'd explore a relationship between the two, or at least a crush or whatever is going on in this issue. Since humor doesn't seem to be something that is his forte, except maybe in a little bit with Dial H, which is his better comic. In any event, absolutely frustrating. My vent about Harley Quinn is, I don't know what's going on here, but with AT&T owning DC, it's like they're schizophrenic. They don't know. It's like DC or AT&T is trying to suck and blow at the same time. Now, try to do that. I'll take your word for it. I'm assuming it's not going to work out very well for you. Pick something. I don't understand. You got Harley Quinn on. You have a great successful Harley Quinn cartoon where she's with Poison Ivy. You're building on that. Why would you want to build on the relationship suggest that Harley's going to be with Booster Gold in the comic books? I don't know. To me, create some consistency, but I don't know. It's another example of creating an ongoing disconnect between the most powerful social media out there, i.e. TV and successful TV shows, and the comic books. I don't understand it. Why would you just flip the script like that? Like, the whole thing is it's craziness to me. I don't, they finally, for once, we actually have a character that has successfully made the transition from, i.e. straight to lesbian. And really, I mean, when you think about it, it's Harley Quinn. Why not just make it official? But now they're gonna backtrack again. It's just, I don't know. It just seems, it's like they just trying to poke the bear and create a bunch of nonsense.
I have no idea what we were saying, but I know you don't like that run. So,
I said that Sam Humphries got the idea from Heroes in Crisis.
Oh yeah.
Now, when you read Heroes in Crisis, did you see any chemistry, romantic chemistry between Booster Gold and Harley Quinn in Heroes in Crisis? I don't know. I sure as hell didn't. Last time I checked, Wally West was a murderer in that. I see, and Poison Ivy decided to bloom like a freaking flower.
Listen, I gave
back evil. I mean, good grief.
I gave myself the peace of mind to drop that book after issue 3. So, cheers to my smart decision.
You're a wise man, if a little inebriated.
In my inebriated state, I will concur that I think that I have a decent foresight, as I called the Bendis shit, called the end of the Tom King train. What's next? Who knows? But stay tuned on Dark Knight Nation for more perpetually depressing statements.
And yes, some okie do. That is Betty Boop in the background there. Yes, I have a life-size Betty Boop. Yeah,
come on, that's a comic boom staple. How do you get it together, Okie?
Hey, you have wet dreams of Detective Comics. I got Betty Boop in the background as backup. It's all good.
Listen, are you shaming me? Are you shaming a young aspiring comic book creator for sleeping, eating, and dreaming comic books? Come on. Where do you get off?
At least now I know why you read Detective Comics digitally.
Cheers. Okay. Well, next, I do want to go back to a comment, just a loving comment from our pal Nerdy Blurb TV. When I think it refers to when I had mentioned me trying to make good comics, he said, you will, he will. DKN has the passion to produce a great comic. I will reiterate my statement. Love you 3000, brother. I appreciate the confidence, and that is certainly the goal. I want to make the best possible art I can at the end of the day, and I 1000,000,000,000% appreciate your confidence in that. Samoki Dude also asked how my novella was going. It's good. I am currently in talks with an imprint of HarperCollins about getting it published in some sort of collection. So I appreciate you remembering and considering that and checking up on the well-being of that. Thank you. I appreciate you. And things are going fairly well. Talks are to be had, and if I can ask for anything, the talks are definitely there. So I appreciate it. Let's see, because I want to try to we'll skip over a couple because I would definitely want to try to keep up with these comments. Okie, I definitely do have wet dreams of Brubaker on Batman. I will openly admit it right now in my inebriated state. Regarding Brubaker, Taylor Pector says he doesn't think that he has interest in returning, and I also think that he has a contract with Image. I didn't know that as an independent. I mean, because I know Image generally has a different relationship with its creators than other independent comic book publishers, which I can't rule or deny because I don't 100% know what that relationship is like. But I think there might be a potential. It's not a hill it's definitely not a hill I'm willing to die on. But like Boom had said, and like I had mentioned prior, I had heard a lot of ramblings about how his kind of main beef was with Dan DiDio, and I think that after the issue that was had with Mark Waid, with both Mark Waid and Greg Rucka, I think that if those can be mulled over, maybe Brubaker could. And that's also like just wishful thinking, because I think that with him having really matured as a writer through doing all of those crime noir books through Image, that his Batman would be infinitely better than his first stab at Batman, which I still think is pretty good. So that might be more wishful thinking. I mean, I don't know, Boom. Do you think that there's a potential of him coming back?
What, Brubaker?
Yeah.
I'm inclined to say no. He's just too successful with his fade out and his crime draws. He's just too successful. I mean, it would have to be. I remember Greg Rucka made the comment in an interview that he was. I mean, they paid. I don't know what they paid Rucka, but they paid him pretty good to come back to do Wonder Woman Rebirth. He didn't think he'd ever come back. He was on record. He himself said he joked about being on record saying he'd never come back, but they sort of had a reconciliation. I mean, he had a reconciliation with Didio. Didio was, he got him back, and they had a healing, but what's interesting about Rucka leaving DC, Rucka wanted to explore more of the ramifications. He had more of Wonder Woman stories to tell back in 2009. He wanted to explore the ramifications of the breakup of the Trinity from Infinite Crisis. And I've said this before in some of our discussions, how that was such a missed opportunity. Infinite Crisis was supposed to be about what happens when the relationship between Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman break down. Wonder Woman snapped Maxwell Lord's neck. Superman was against that because, you know, he would rather have died than have Wonder Woman kill anybody, let alone Maxwell Lord. Batman kicked Wonder Woman out of the Batcave. The ramifications from that, the storytelling potential, I think were huge. It could have been the equivalent of DC's Civil War. Rucka wanted to explore that more, and they wouldn't let him. And he had a falling out, and I don't blame him. And when I think of some of the crap stories, I mean, we went nowhere after the 52. I didn't like we had 1 year later, and don't even get me started on that Gong Show. One of my pet peeves is time jumps. I hate time jumps in comic books. I fucking hate them. Why the hell would I want a time jump? If you're going to jump ahead 1 year, you're going to tell me what, you know, that's shitty storytelling. And DC has done it twice. They did it with Futures End. They did it with 1 year later, coming out of the fifth, you know, jump ahead 1 year later. Well, what good is that? So then that just gives them an opportunity to write the character out of character. And you don't know why they're out of character because you've missed the whole year, and then they don't know what happened either, and then they get new writers to inconsistently fill in the blanks, and it's one great big dog and pony show, and it's shit. It disrespects continuity, it disrespects the fans, and it's lazy storytelling, and it's this nonsense of storytelling over continuity. It's like, no, if you know what you're doing, and if you're a good writer, then you shouldn't have a problem being able to read a story and write something that makes sense and create evolution of character. That's one of the reasons why we're so disappointed with Bendis. Bendis should know better, but he doesn't.
So I disagree with you. I think that time skips can be very useful, especially in a space where it's so continuity heavy. I think that there are certain developments that would be more boring to read in active time than to hear about later. I think that if used, and it's like anything, right? There are mitigating circumstances to anything ever in the history of the world. But specifically when it comes to storytelling, I think that if used properly, time skips can be really, really great because it allows you a certain, not even really a freedom, but it gives you the ability to get to a certain point and kind of use the narrative technique of casually unraveling what has happened over whatever time you've skipped in tandem with the narrative of the present. I think that if used under the right circumstances, it can be a very powerful narrative tool because it will simultaneously kind of attract people, right? Like you hear there's a time skip, the first thing you want to figure out is what the fuck happened. And it'll kind of leave a lot of people waiting because you're starting to see the ramifications in the present, and it kind of feeds into that desire to figure out what's going on. And especially in a periodical medium for storytelling, I think it gives a lot of opportunity to keep the fans really synced in, right? Like it's a storytelling strategy to hook fans in if used well. Like I said, like anything, it's been done poorly. Most things in storytelling have been done poorly. But with that being said, I think that when done well, it can do a lot for the characters, it can do a lot for the world, and it can do a lot to hook readers in terms of what's going on within the world and the plotting of the overall universe. So while I agree that it can be done poorly, so can pretty much anything else ever. But I think that when done well, it is a really, really nice tool for storytellers, especially when they're dealing with a world with such complex continuity.
I still say it's a cop out. I straight up do. But of course you're right. Anything done right it can work. I just think that if I don't know what is the point of having a rich continuity from which to build upon if you don't build upon it and you're just going to jump ahead and then let's randomly fill in the blanks. Because by the way, the New 52 was really a colorful time jump. Is really what the New 52 was. The New 52, they did whatever they wanted with the characters, and it was a quasi-time jump, but yet kind of a different universe. They kept some aspects. They kept some aspects, ignored others, but you didn't know what it was. That's why it was all jumbled. And what started off as looking fresh and new became what it actually was, and what I said it was at the beginning. And by the way, I told you so. I told you so. I told you so. Because I always said at the beginning of the New 52, I was going to say I told you so when it fails, and it did fail, and I'm right. And it's because it looked fresh and new at the beginning. But everything looks fresh and new at the beginning because it's a beginning. Everything looks fresh and new at the beginning. But you only see the holes once you start moving forward. And nobody knew what the foundation was with the New 52. And because you never have a grounding. And that's what I don't like about time jumps, is that you lose the grounding. And it's like saying to the writer, guess what? We jumped ahead a year. Do whatever you want. We'll justify it later. Don't worry about it. Write whatever you want.
I'll argue that I think if used well, optimally, the writer will be able to kind of skip over not unimportant expository information, but expository information that doesn't really deserve a lot of panel time. I think that kind of expediting unnecessary processes that might garner solid results are very necessary, and like I said, it's been done wrong before, and it will be continued to be done wrong by a number of other people. But under the right creative hands, I certainly think that time skips are a really great way to kind of skip to the meat and potatoes when the expository information that you'll be getting is important, but experiencing the process by which that might have been delivered in real time might be kind of boring, right? Like I liked the idea of infinite crisis. I like the idea of skipping. Like I know you don't, but I like generally the concept of 1 year later, where you see what happens to a world without the Trinity, because we're skipping all of the fat. We're assuming the world already that lacks the Trinity, and that's the real weight of the situation, right? It's not what immediately happens while the Trinity is gone. It's what is society a year after the Trinity has been gone? What kind of impacts does that have, right? Like and sometimes the right writer can really develop those scenarios, but in the same respect, I think that under the right creative hands, like I've reiterated multiple times, it gives you the opportunity to cut through the fat and get to the stakes and understand what the real implications and what the real drama is at the core of that supposed time skip. So, I think that's just kind of a preferential difference. And I've seen writers do it really well, and I've seen writers do it really poorly. And I think just kind of coming from that, I'm not willing to kind of make a blanket statement that time skips are bad, because I think that in certain situations they can certainly be beneficial in expediting unnecessary kind of slowness in pace. So,
yeah. Well, I'll use the example of Tom Taylor. I
Sure.
would have said that, like with time jumps, to me they're cliche and they don't work very well. So if somebody comes along and does a time jump story, that'll impress me, because they take something that I think is a trope and they make it, and they impress the shit out of me. That's impressive. Tom Taylor did that with me with Suicide Squad. I thought, what can Tom Taylor do with Suicide Squad that's going to be new? I said, this is going to be the same old tropes again. How many versions of the Suicide Squad do we need? And along comes Tom Taylor, and I actually found it to be actually kind of refreshing. And he actually, it has some similar tropes, of course, but I really liked issue 5. I mean, it's sort of, there was a great, cool death, great dialogue. I think he really hit it out of the park. So, I mean, the one advantage of a trope like that, and I do consider time jump stories, they've become a trope a little to some extent, and I do consider it lazy storytelling. To me, it's a challenge. If you're a good writer, you can make anything work, including a time jump and including writing Suicide Squad. And, and I see what I did there. I managed to use that as an opportunity to compliment Tom Taylor, because I want to drink to Tom Taylor because the guy's amazing. How about Deceased Unkillables #3 and Suicide Squad #5, gentlemen?
Listen, as much as I don't entirely agree with your premise, I agree with your affinity for Tom Taylor. So I will cheers to that. I had to clarify my cheers, so cheers to that.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. And I think honestly, and it's not like, oh boy, I'm like an aspiring writer, I know this thing. I think it's just that, at this point, I've kind of looked into a lot of different tools and techniques of storytellers, and I've seen people do it well. And I think there's obviously going to be a perspective in general from somebody who looks at it from the perspective who aspires to create, and somebody who looks at it as a consumer and a longtime reader. And generally, I think in terms of my personality, you know me, I'm generally not willing to make blanket statements ever, just because like that is the one thing that I'm ever cautious at, because I find a lot of grays, where I'm not really willing to make black and white statements. But I think that you have a really viable concern, because I do agree that I think that at least 85 to 90% of the time, writers do not use that tool well. And when that overwhelming proportion of people who try it don't do it well, there's a plausible kind of caution as a reader that I'll admit to understanding as to why you don't like it as a kind of tool. But moving forward into some of these chats, Paul Baker says that that the beer is getting to him. So apologies if he says something really stupid later. Listen, Paul, one, I forgive you, but B, there's nothing to be forgiven about, because I've been speaking like an idiot for since I hit my fourth glass of Jack. So literally don't worry about it, my friend. I do also want to acknowledge here, let's see, Ant Duhar saying, in regards to your early talk about Heroes in Crisis, he saw no chemistry between Harley and Booster in Heroes in Crisis. But what he can say is bros before heroes is all he got from that book. Yeah, that's there's not much to get out of that book, but I guess if there was one thing, that'd be it. And thank you for joining us, my friend. Hopefully you have a nice chilled glass of something to melt away the horrors that were Heroes in Crisis.
And speaking of Harley and Booster and Heroes in Crisis, Booster Gold also made an appearance in Heroes in Crisis, and Ted Kord ends up in Suicide Squad number 5. Ted Kord. Did you read Suicide Squad number 5?
Dude, I'm so behind on Suicide Squad. It's not even funny.
You have to read it, because Ted Kord could be the potential bad guy. Now, I think it's misdirection because it's Tom Taylor, but it's pretty cool that the cliffhanger, the way it ended, issue 5, who was really behind what's going on. I mean, great storytelling. This is what I'm talking about, Tom. I'm not talking out of my ass here, man. This guy knows how to write. He knows how to get people's interest. And you know, he's like I say, I'm singing the praises of that of Suicide Squad. And the other thing is, if you're a comic book speculator like me, the average issue of issues 1 through issue 1 sold like 40,000. Issues 2 to 5 of Suicide Squad sold anywhere, I think it's from 20 to 25,000. Yeah. Grossly underordered. If you're a speculator, pick up Suicide Squad issues 2 to 5. They're probably still on the stands at your local comic shop. I guarantee you that Tom Taylor's Suicide Run is going to build in value within 6 months to a year. You'll be able to unload them for $10 to $15 an issue.
Big call. I will make one request while inebriated, mostly calling on Joe because of his skills with a computer. Can somebody make a meme out of this face? Okay, I'll give you ample time to screenshot that. Go back if you want. I'm looking forward to seeing memes on Twitter because I'm self-deprecating, but especially when I'm drunk. That was my reaction to Ted Kord becoming the villain. I'm so behind on Suicide Squad. I haven't read it since issue 1 because I'm a horrible comic book fan. So I look forward to catching up with it.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. Ted Kord, I don't think Ted Kord is the villain, and he says he's not. But I'm just saying it's misdirection on the part of Tom Taylor, and that's what I like about it. And you know, it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I read issue 1. I can only really speak on that, but it's a great approach. Tom Taylor, you can always assure that whether or not you love it, it puts immense care in his work, and I think that at bare minimum, that is all you can really ask from a creator. Joe, I guess, is listening to us while he's driving. You're my radio show. Listen, that is such a phenomenal compliment because most of my favorite podcasts I listen to while on the road. So I very much appreciate you. I do want to give a shout out to Tevye Smolka for popping into the chat. I assume that his Jonathan Samuel Kent senses went off when we were talking about Bendis is Superman, and he knew to come in. So thanks for joining us, man. Hello,
Tevye.
I'm sure. Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure Boom has his big hello to give to you. Let's see. Kelvin Rivera says he kind of looks like John Cena. I don't know who you're talking about because I'm fucking horrible and we're 12 minutes behind this comment. But if you'd like to clarify, I'm here for it, my friend.
Well, he's obviously talking about me.
Yes, absolutely. The Corona Caped Crusader himself, Comic Boom, certainly has a resemblance to John Cena.
It's actually it's more accurate to say that John Cena looks a little bit like Comic Boom. That's what you're supposed to say.
Listen, if I were to say that John Cena didn't take any influence from you, I would be lying. So here we are. Let's see here. Scrolling through the chat. I apologize if it takes me a minute to filter. I am definitely getting a little bit drunk. Let's see. What's I'm not gonna lie, I can barely fucking read right now. Taylor Bechter says, I liked it 1 year later. There were some great stories that came out of that era. John's Booster Gold, Superman Up and Away, and some lackluster Heinberg's Wonder Woman. Yeah, it's weird because I definitely went back and read those things pretty retroactively. So I largely like that era of DC Comics. I think there was a lot coming out of that kind of Infinite Crisis era that were really strong. I actually just picked up, I haven't owned it before, I've read it multiple times, Identity Crisis, to finally have in my hands because I unapologetically love this story for all of its controversies, and I love what it added to the universe and the kind of tone that it had. So I'm a big proponent of that era of DC Comics. I know, Boom, you had said you weren't a fan of 1 year later, but how do you feel about some of the stories that Taylor might have a little bit of preference?
I agree with Taylor. Actually, my favorite 1 year later story coming out of 52, the 1 year later, Superman Up and Away, that was written by Kurt Busiek. He did a really good job. That was actually a pretty good story. It was 8 issues long. It was very well done. He says that the Heinberg Wonder Woman was lackluster. I actually respectfully disagree with you, Taylor. In fact, if you look at Wonder Woman sales in the last 15 years, the highest number of Wonder Woman sales was the Heinberg Wonder Woman run. And why was that? I'll tell you why that was. I have a very strong opinion on this. And fortunately for you, I've been drinking, so you'll be sure to hear it. And that is that Wonder Woman had a secret identity. Coming out of 52, Clark Kent said to Wonder Woman didn't know what she wanted to do with her life. And Clark Kent touched his glasses and said, well, I have an idea for you. And she was Diana Prince. She donned the white suit again, just like she did during the 1970s, during that terrible feminist run of Wonder Woman that got bad press. But when Alan Heinberg was writing Wonder Woman in that 5 or 6 issues, whatever it was, before Jodi Picoult, who was a novelist, started writing her, the sales were extremely high. But Heinberg was also writing a TV series at the time. I think it was Grey's Anatomy or something else. And he couldn't find enough time to continue writing Wonder Woman. And so, unfortunately, for whatever reason, despite the higher sales, DC decided to backtrack on the secret identity and everything else. And I think that was a big mistake. I think it would have been, I don't know. I know I'm an outlier on that, probably in the minority, but I think it would have been, I think Wonder Woman as an ambassador, if to me, she's ripe. You can pull a Grayson for Wonder Woman for at least 12 to 24 issues. Have her be engage in espionage for Themyscira in other countries. Have a secret identity. Infiltrating different military bases around the globe. If you're an island of 3,000 crazed, psychotic Amazons, and you're the only one that's remotely sane, i.e. Diana, and you're the potential heir apparent queen of Themyscira, and you want to get to know man's world, what better way to do that than a secret identity? The last thing you want to do is spout a glorified bikini and run around with a magic rope. I mean, really, DC hasn't even begun to explore the type of stories that they ought to tell. And incidentally, the last time we saw Wonder Woman in a jumpsuit was in Wonder Woman Annual number 3, that introduced us to War Master Paula von Gunther.
Well, one thing that I think is a big interesting takeaway is that what's interesting is I know both you and Taylor are very big Wonder Woman fans, but seem to have a lot of interesting disagreements. Personally, I would love to facilitate, because I'm a very mid-grade Wonder Woman fan. I would love to facilitate a conversation between the two of you, because I know both of you have ample love for Wonder Woman, but very differing perspectives. And I know, Taylor, you and I have been discussing behind kind of closed doors about having you back on the channel, so that might be an interesting video. Who knows? I think it'd be fun. Let's see. Tevia and wants to know, why is Ted Cord evil? And kind of as a follow-up, some Okie dude asks, isn't Ted Cord the Ditko Blue Beetle? Ted Cord wasn't there a Blue Beetle right before Ted Cord? But Ted Cord is kind of probably most well known for being a Blue Beetle. And then regarding the Suicide Squad related question of Ted Cord being evil, I think you'll definitely be able to answer that better than myself.
Yeah, first of all, we don't know if Ted Cord is actually evil. He's just involved somehow in an organization that ultimately ended up hiring a guy named Locke to manipulate the Suicide Squad to do some of their machinations in abducting a leader of a foreign Middle Eastern country. So Ted Cord, we don't know what, it just ended on a high note. It ended on that cliffhanger that Ted Cord, that the Suicide Squad is now going after Ted Cord, and they want to kill him because they think so. That's what's awesome about it. So that's what, and Ted Cord is Ted Cord, and they write him. And Tom Taylor nails the characterization, as he always does with DC characters. He nails Ted Cord. Ted Cord just sounds like he's a little bit surprised that they're so upset with him, in a sense, and it's just perfect. He just nails it, and it's a great issue. So I don't think Ted Cord's evil, because I think Tom Taylor's not that stupid. If this was written by Bendis, I would assume Ted Cord is not only going to be evil, but they're going to age him up to the age of 65 or some such nonsense, and move him to Earth 3 and trap him in a volcano for 7 years and then bring him back. But Bendis isn't writing it, so that's not going to happen. Is Ted Cord the next is Ted Cord the Ditko Blue Beetle? I actually don't know. I'm not an expert on the history of Blue Beetle. But Steve Ditko is, I guess he could be. I guess I'm not really sure if I quite get the Ditko reference. That's the SpiderMan artist, right?
Well, I actually do think that Steve Ditko had a huge impact in the creating of a couple of Charleston characters, which are now owned by DC.
Oh, that could be. Yeah, then that probably is then some Okie dude. Yeah, you're right, man. You could educate us on that Okie dude.
Yeah. If you have the time to peep over on the Googles or whatever, let us know, because I'm actually pretty interested in finding out. And Oki also says that he's interested in starting his own podcast. Dude, 100% do it up. Like, share your thoughts out there with the world. Be you. When I started Let's Talk Comics, it's funny because I think Comic Boom, back when I first met him, was my first guest. We did a stream on the trajectory of the DC New Age of Heroes post-metal, and a year and some change after that, we went to Comic-Con, and I think that doing these types of things makes a lot of really, really great relationships, a lot of great friendships. But aside from the fact opportunities, man, like, I know you're a creative, and for as tiny as my channel is, and for as tiny viewership that I tend to bring in, and for the wonderful tight-knit community I have, I've had some very, very just great opportunities doing these things, man. So put your thoughts out there, do your thing, share who you are and your opinions with the world. Obviously be respectful about it, but yeah, dude, fucking do it. Absolutely. I don't know. Boom. Any comment on that?
Well, about him starting his own podcast?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, absolutely do that. The only thing I would mention is, I started off this stream venting a little bit about the YouTube algorithm and stuff. Let's be absolutely clear here. You have to do this because you love comic books and you love what you do. I love doing this. I come on this. You got to do it because you love it, and because that's what's going to get you through it. Because good Lord, none of us here, obviously, we're not monetized. We don't even have 1,000 subs. I mean, there are people that get 1,000 subs in 2 to 3 months. And, I've been at this for like 6 years now, and I just take my time. I'll spend 2 hours on one thumbnail. that you see for 15 seconds on one of my videos. So obviously, if whatever I'm doing, you probably don't want to copy what I'm doing. So, but I say that because you got to do what you love. It's a creative outlet, and you're gonna, but find your niche, and if you have the goal of massive growth or what have you, then there are definitely lots of videos that you can watch on YouTube on how best to do that and to grow it and everything else. But first and foremost, it's just like reading comic books, man. You collect what you love, and it's the passion for comics that keeps you buying more comics and budgeting for it and going broke and losing your relationships and getting divorced and drinking and all that stuff. But, bottom line is you have to love what you do. You have to love it. So if you're going to podcast, man, do it, and make sure if you want as few people on your podcast listening as possible, you can always have me as a guest.
Yeah, man. That's a worthy investment, man. Having this guy as a podcast guest will at minimum guarantee you something fun, man. And when you decide to get that going, hit us up, and maybe the Let's Talk Comics crew will make our grand appearance on your podcast and shake things up at bare minimum. So Oki also brings up that my hair is down, so it means that he's starting to get drunk. Dog, I've been drunk. We've been here for an hour and 10 minutes. I've been drunk for at least 45 minutes. So we've gotten there. We're hitting some serious strides. Let's see here. Tevia Smoga says, Dark Knight Nation, too bad we also got the Amazon attack story event, which was terrible. I haven't read it, and I know Boom, as a comic book fan, probably has more of a commentary. What are you thinking about that, brother?
Well, Amazon's attack, you would, you know what? If we ever did it, we could actually do an entire podcast on how funny it was. Amazon's attack was written by a writer by the name of, I think it was Pfeiffer, something Pfeiffer.
Is that it?
No, that's not the writer. But anyway, Will Pfeiffer wrote Amazon's attack, and what it was that the Amazons came. They had a disagreement with Washington, and Amazon's attacked Washington D.C. And the Amazon's attack series was known for two events that drove the internet crazy. If you were a comic collector at the time, the first thing was a comment by Batman when he watched the Amazons attack Washington. The Amazons attacked Washington with killer bees, and the Batman line that everybody criticized was Batman said, "Bees, my God." Like, it was such a big deal. Like, the bees were attacking Washington, killer bees. And it was such a joke because it's like killer bees in comic books. It became a meme. It was ridiculous. The other thing that happened in Amazon's attack that people highly criticized Will Pfeiffer for was that Batman shows up and he defeats Cersei, the sorceress, the all-powerful multiversal sorceress. Batman defeats Cersei because he had Zatanna teach him how to use magic in 5 minutes, shows up behind Cersei, says something backwards, and defeats Cersei. And once again, Batman saved. It's not Zatanna, it's Batman shows up. That's literally what happened. It is such a highly criticized series for those two scenes. That's really all I remember about it. I remember a few other things too. Wonder Girl sided with the Amazons, and it was a little bit like Civil War in parts. And anyways, it was I should almost go back and reread it, and it just drove so many of us absolutely crazy, but at the same time it made us laugh and chuckle at the same time.
Well, I mean, I know you have a fundamental dislike of kind of the status of Batman in the kind of world culture and in the atmosphere of the multiverse.
I don't like Uber Batman.
Listen, you can be wrong, but I still like you. It's okay. And Tevia brings up that the Dan Garrett mentioned he was the first Blue Beetle. So I guess my half knowledgeable comment on Ted Kord perhaps being the second might have been true. Thank you, Tevia, for clarifying. I appreciate you. Taylor Pector mentions that he liked the idea of Heinberg's Wonder Woman and loved the art by the Dodsons. It just didn't connect with him. He also can't comment of the massive delays it had since he reads it in trade.
Yeah.
So the Heinberg's Wonder Woman, what story is that kind of pertaining to?
The Heinberg Wonder Woman was really, Wonder Woman assumed a secret identity, and she literally had a secret identity.
I thought
she even had, and Wayne Tech, Bruce Wayne gave her an invisible plane. She utilized Wayne Tech for a new plane. It was actually it was going back to the almost pre-original Crisis, the pre-George Perez era. Because when George Perez did Wonder Woman in 1986, he eliminated Steve Trevor as a love interest by aging Steve Trevor up. See how aging up doesn't work? Anyways, Bendis, it doesn't. But anyways, pay attention. So aging up doesn't work. Time jumps don't work. Okay, anyways, he aged up Steve Trevor. George Perez did that. He got rid of I think he even got rid of the invisible plane, and he got rid of Wonder Woman's secret identity. And what Heinberg did is that he brought back the secret identity, and he never brought back, I don't think he brought back Steve Trevor, but no, he brought back, I think Nemesis maybe was part of that. Steve Trevor became Nemesis for a while, and it was a younger Steve Trevor. And so that was a big deal. And so I thought I was happy because they were going to return to the pre-original Crisis, which, I thought was a good thing. But in any event, they soon abandoned it when Heinberg left, despite the fact that it got higher sales and the art was pretty good with the Dodsons. So good with the Dodsons that Dodsons are routinely go-to cover artists for Wonder Woman to this day.
Listen, I love the Dodsons Wonder Woman comic cover art. So even though I'm not overly familiar with that old school Wonder Woman run, I can certainly agree on the quality of the Dodsons, because I mean there's something about just generally when they're drawing super heroines in general. There's something about them. It's like them and Adam Hughes that I think that are just at the top tier of being able to kind of convey the personality of super heroines more than anybody else in comics. So I can at least speak on that quality. Like I said before, and I'm not afraid to say that my knowledge of Wonder Woman is a lot more modern. I took more notice in her kind of from the period of the OMAC project and forward, which isn't a super great sample size. So it's interesting to get that perspective, though. Let's see. Paul Baker slightly disagrees with your comment on Tom Taylor. He's great at characterization for most characters, but he can't write Wonder Woman. And before I let Comic Boom go at it, because he has clearly more knowledge on the characterization of Wonder Woman than I do, all I will say is this, is that if Tom Taylor is batting 99 out of 100, that's pretty damn good. And if there's one character that you might not exactly feel connected to the characterization of, I think that's a pretty solid average to be hitting. So
I actually agree with Paul Baker. I think Paul Baker, if I might be so bold, he might be referring to Wonder Woman's characterization in the pages of Injustice was pretty aggressive. She was definitely fairly aggressive, and she was arguably written. Some people were disturbed how Wonder Woman was written in Injustice. I didn't mind the extra aggression, but I can understand the criticism. I also want to take note of Taylor Pector's comments that both Waid and Johns have admitted that most writers struggle with Wonder Woman, and that is very true. Many writers do. It's why I've always stated that. But I think most writers don't. I think they lack the confidence when they write Wonder Woman, and they're afraid. They're afraid to do what needs to be done, which is why I've always said Wonder Woman's greatest moment was when she snapped Maxwell Lord's neck. Not just because it was a good storyline, but because I couldn't believe DC let Greg Rucka do that. And what was so disappointing is that once they let Greg Rucka do that, they wouldn't let Greg Rucka explore the ramifications of that. I mean, imagine you're a member of the Trinity, you're Wonder Woman. Imagine you're a super villain, and you know that the Trinity doesn't kill, and all of a sudden you've seen Wonder Woman snap Maxwell Lord's neck. I don't care who you are. The next time you face Wonder Woman, you're going to be thinking to yourself, I'd rather face Batman or Superman. I might get my ass kicked, but I know I'm going to survive the experience. You know what I mean? I mean, it was unexplored. It was unexplored, and I really wish they would go back and revisit it.
Well, you heard it here, folks. I mean, like Wonder Woman, I think is a very difficult character to come by because there is, I think, two very different audiences for the character. There's the audience of, for example, those who kind of value the Greg Rucka piece overall Wonder Woman and the Brian Azzarello willing to get down and dirty Wonder Woman, which Greg Rucka has shown in the OMAC project when she snapped Maxwell Lord's neck. but there does seem to be a certain division of the character. I think both fit. I think that you can both be loving, but also kind of not, I don't want to say compromising, but Wonder Woman to me, especially given her monstrously long lifetime, and her kind of veteran status in war and warfare, I think knows when she needs to kind of put aside her ideals and when to kind of be an efficient warrior, above all. So I think that there's certainly a compromise between those two visions, which it's interesting because one would think that there's an inherent dichotomy that has to be there, right? That almost can't exist in harmony. But I feel that as complex as Wonder Woman's character is, that it can exist in a harmony, right? There is the optimism, but there's also the part of Wonder Woman who knows that there's an efficiency to war that you have to assume in order to come out of it as the victor. So it's a weird thing, and it might also be a product of me never really willing to make blanket statements and constantly kind of sitting on the fence about things. But Wonder Woman, I think, is a particularly interesting character because I think that if you lean into one side of the other, there's always going to be a large audience of people that have their disagreements with how she's characterized. And there's commentary here about her portrayal and injustice in particular as perhaps a little bit one-sided. But I think that by virtue of it being an Elseworld story, it kind of gives you the capability of catering to an extreme potential of Wonder Woman and who she might be. It was definitely a little bit odd, but I don't think that it speaks to Tom Taylor's particular misunderstanding of the character. I think it was an opportunity seized in the kind of hyper aggressive context of in the Injustice universe. I certainly don't think that Superman in the main universe would make the same decisions that the Injustice Superman made under the circumstances, for example, of having killed Lois. So I think that it's just kind of the opportunity seized by virtue of it not being the main universe. There are kind of decisions that you could see potentially being made, albeit extreme, but not decisions you might not have settled well within the main continuity. So by virtue of the fact that it's essentially Elseworlds, I'm pretty able to reconcile with that myself.
Yeah. It is interesting about Wonder Woman, and I always find it very curious that people have an easier time, writers seem to have an easier time writing a Superman story. And Superman can be challenging enough because in many ways, Superman is almost too perfect sometimes as well. But they really struggle with Wonder Woman, and I can almost see it because, and I think, I don't really know why. I mean, I'm just sort of thinking. Obviously, I'm thinking out loud. I think I'm thinking right now, but I'm thinking. But I mean, we all have. I mean, you and I. You talk to three different guys, you get three different versions of their perfect woman. So when you write Wonder Woman, and she's a superhero, well, are you crossing the line if you make her be aggressive or bitch slap a villain? For example, if Wonder Woman, why does Wonder Woman? I said this in my last review. If you're for Wonder Woman, if Wonder Woman is battling Paula von Gunther and Wonder Woman knows that the supervillain has a healing factor, why doesn't Wonder Woman beat the woman half to death? She's going to heal in a day.
Yeah.
Why hold back? Well, if you do that in a comic book, well, Wonder Woman, Wonder Woman would never be that cruel. Well, how are you being cruel? How is that cruelty if you know the person's going to heal? You're making a point. You're beating them half to death. You know they're going to heal. Beat them so that they experience the pain of death and suffering, and then they come back. And now I realize the answer to that is, well, she's full with compassion and love and everything else. That's fine. But she's also an Amazon. And now this is where I think the real answer to the question is, and let's just say it, it's just the corporate powers that be. AT&T, it's a corporate entity. They don't want Wonder Woman to be seen as too aggressive. So they always have to pull back. And that's why I say we will never see Wonder Woman, especially now that she's a big time movie star now. She's in the movies. We will never see Wonder Woman kill anybody in comic books unless it's a dragon or a monster or some three-headed, dragon of some kind. We're never going to see it again. I don't think we're ever going to get a definitive Wonder Woman story. Wonder Woman does not have a Batman Year One. Wonder Woman doesn't have a Superman for all seasons. Wonder Woman does not have a definitive origin. She doesn't have it. She doesn't have a definitive origin take story. She doesn't have an epic tale that people relate to. Superman has a whole slew of them. Batman has a whole slew of them. Name a real Wonder Woman story that stands out that you could literally say, no, that, like Daredevil, we got Born Again. Batman, we got Frank Miller. We got Dark Knight. Superman, we got All Seasons. We got a slew of Superman tales. What do we have for Wonder Woman? And then people will say, well, what about George Perez? George Perez had like a 24-issue run, and it was fine, but it wasn't. It was kind of boring and lovey and dovey, and it's not timeless, and it just wasn't the same. I don't know. I realize I'll stop talking on this point now, but you get my point. I don't, unless you disagree with me. Is there one particular Wonder Woman story where if a young woman came up to you, 14-year-old came up to you and said, I want to read Wonder Woman, what story would you refer to her off the top of your head? Is there anything that pops in your mind immediately?
Well, I'll say this, and I'll openly admit, like I said, Taylor has a much wider birth of knowledge regarding Wonder Woman than I do. But I think one story that kind of really exemplifies the character that I think most Wonder Woman fans might kind of recommend might be Hikatea by Greg Rucka. And I say that as an avid Batman fan, while he gets stomped down in that book. I think Hikatea is kind of a fundamentally strong interpretation of Wonder Woman's character and her kind of resoluteness in her cause. So I think there's certainly one, but in the same context as many characters, I think that it's just by virtue of maybe Wonder Woman not assuming the same popularity as maybe a Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, so on and so forth, that it might not get the same it might not get the same exposure. So I'll make a promise to you this, man. If I ever get the opportunity where I get to say I want to write a character, if I ever get to touch Wonder Woman, I'll definitely be consulting you guys. That's a definite promise.
I tell you what, man. If I ever had the power, the abilities, or whatever, Wonder Woman has yet. She's had some great writers on her. She's had Gail Simone, John Byrne. She's had Greg Rucka and everything else. And there's been some moments of epicness and some moments, some flares of greatness here and there. But I tell you what, nothing has ever really. I've always said, and I know it sounds. I'm always shooting my mouth off and sounding egotistical, but that's comic boom, and that's just the reality. I refer to myself in the third person when I'm drinking.
Listen, that's a highlight of status when you can refer to yourself in third person.
Yeah, I've always said that if somebody's going to write the definitive Wonder Woman story, it's going to have to be me, because I'm the only one that can say with passion. I literally know the story I would tell, and it would be fantastic. But nobody. Have you ever heard of anybody? Have you heard a writer anywhere? I've never come across a writer that has ever said, "Oh my God, I got a Wonder Woman story I'm dying to tell." No one says that.
Whoa. I will say this, is that on record, Scott Snyder has gone on to say, as much as I don't love his recent works, he has gone on to say that him and Greg do have a vision for Wonder Woman that they've always wanted to tell.
Okay. I hope you're right. No, straight up, man. I hope you're right. And you're absolutely right. And that's one of the reasons I'm excited about Death Metal, is because she looks ridiculous in the way Capullo has drawn her with that dumb looking, I don't know, magic chainsaw she's sporting or whatever the hell that is. But I mean, hey, look, if it's epic, she seems to be a little bit more aggressive and everything else. But let me tell you something. If Scott Snyder's going to pull one of these, she's going to be aggressive. And then at the end, she's going to back away and throw her magic lasso around the bad guy and get on her knees and supplicate herself again. I'm going to puke. Well, I don't want to do the cliche thing. Like, have her do something that really makes it stand out.
Well, there are definitely stances to be taken. And on the Wonder Woman train, Let's see. Paul Baker says that there was a weird period where in every New 52 book besides her own, she was basically just written as Thor. And before I take a 2-minute break to hit the restroom to allow Comic Boom to hit his Wonder Woman rant, I will say that I think that there are some very inherent similarities between Wonder Woman and Thor that you can kind of make connections to. And it's often why I say that I think Jason Aaron would have a wonderful run on Wonder Woman. So with that being said, I am going to go hit the restroom as Comic Boom lets off his long, knowledgeable rant about Wonder Woman and regarding Thor. My friend, here is your spotlight.
Well, okay. Paul Baker, I would say about the New 52 version of Wonder Woman, which of course was mostly dominated by Brian Azzarello and Chang's art. That was a 36 issue run of Wonder Woman. I really enjoyed it. She became the god of war. Her primary enemy was the Firstborn, who came back, and that was her primary enemy. I thought that was very well done. I liked the darker take of the Amazons. I thought it was good. You're right that she was written a little bit more like Thor. I remember there was a controversy during the New 52. Wonder Woman actually even called another character. I think she called one of her enemies the bald. I can't remember the name. I got the 2 absolute editions of Brian Azzarello's Wonder Woman. I love it. But she used the word. She called another female villain a bitch, and a bunch of feminists online had a conniption fit. It was like nonsense. But I absolutely loved it. It was Wonder Woman just being a little bit kick ass and taking names. I like the fact I don't know. I actually think Thor's always been better written than Wonder Woman in my mind, pretty much hands down all the time. I think one of the most unexplored mythologies of Wonder Woman has been her magic lasso. There has been some really good stories about the magic lasso, in particular the Golden Perfect during, I think, Joe Kelly during Justice League of America run. There's been lots of different takes on the magic lasso, which are interesting. Even Greg Rucka had a particular take of it. Joe Kelly did, and there's been Gail Simone did as well. John Byrne had different takes. Everyone's had a different take on the magic lasso. They got slightly different interpretations as to what the magic lasso does. Does it compel truth, or does it just cause you to reveal the truth as you see it as an individual versus an objective truth, if there is such a thing in the universe? There's been different interpretations of that. And as a result of that, the different interpretations of the magic lasso has led to inconsistency with Wonder Woman's connection to truth, whereas Thor's better written vis-a-vis Mjolnir the Hammer, because the mythology surrounding the hammer is really rich and complex, and they've done a really good job with Thor's hammer in building it up not just as a weapon of Thor, but as a hero in its own right, almost having sentience in its own right. They really should do that for Wonder Woman in the magic lasso, and it remains, in my view, one of the more unexplored areas of Wonder Woman's mythology.
I think that's a really interesting take. And one thing, it's interesting because a lot of people have varying views on Thor's relationship with Mjolnir and really the kind of context of what it means to be worthy. And the thing I love about Thor, and it's why Thor is, arguably probably at least at bare minimum my second favorite Marvel character, is because the definition of worthiness, right, can really vary. And there are a number of kind of different angles you can look at that from. And I think that's why Thor stories and pertaining to his quote unquote worthiness have this incredible longevity to them, right? Because worthy is such a blanket statement that you can explore from different angles. And I talked about this a little bit in my review of Donny Cates' Thor run, but I love that, for example, they're attacking worthiness from an entirely different perspective, right? Whereas Walter Simonson attacked it from another, and Jason Aaron attacked it from another. And it gives you a number of different outlets in the same way that, like Comic Boom is suggesting, you might be able to do with Wonder Woman. And with Diana in particular, I think that there's a penchant and an ability for a writer to kind of draw some parallels, not only because both of them rely on existing pantheons and legends of gods, but because just, you look at the qualities of these characters, and as much as Thor and Wonder Woman have a lot of differences, there are also, I think, equally a number of similarities that allow for ample storytelling potential. So largely, I think I definitely agree with you there, Boom, and that I think that you could really play with the concept of truth in the way that Mjolnir plays with worthiness, because I think it is so permeating, the concept of truth, and I think that you can attack that from so many different angles and so many different levels. So I would be glad to read a story like that, and it's one of the reasons, like I said prior, that I would entirely love to see Jason Aaron tackle a character like Wonder Woman because of his penchant for being able to write such great Thor stories.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But with that being said, Somoki Dude says, boom, I promise I won't talk about Wonder Woman. Also, boom, 3 drinks later, Wonder Woman is hard to get right. Listen, we're here for these moments. Tevya Smoka says personally he would, wow, that is a big comment. He would love Tom Taylor to write Superman Family because he wrote an excellent Superman Family with Lois Lane, and Jonathan Samuel Kent Superboy in Deceased because it was fantastic. Yes, that is certainly a proving ground by which I think Tom Taylor has shown that he would be an excellent writer for Superman, but I think largely in the way that Tom Taylor has written most things, and even including his run on X-23 and Injustice and a number of other things, I think Tom Taylor has proven that Superman would be very much up his alley, and I think Boom and I have both said on a number of occasions that Tom Taylor is one of those writers that is a chameleon that can write most things, but particularly I think that thematically, character-wise, that Tom Taylor would thrive on Superman. What do you think about that, Boom?
Tom Taylor would absolutely thrive on Superman. There's a sense I get with Tom Taylor's writing that the guy doesn't take it. It's almost like he doesn't take it so goddamn seriously. He's not trying to reinvent the wheel. He's not like Bendis where he's trying to write some sort of giant philosophical thesis on truth. So let's have Superman reveal his secret identity so I can do this massive meta commentary on fake news and truth in our time. Bendis, go back to Marvel. I don't care. It's a superhero comic book. You know what? If I want a deep philosophical thought, you think I read comics seriously? Come on. Like, have a little bit of fun and have a little bit of humor, have a little bit of, talk, pretend, have a normal conversation with someone and tape record it. So the next time you do a dialogue scene, it sounds like 2 human beings talking and not two people in an echo chamber. Okay. Hey, it sounds like a bad CW Supergirl episode. I mean, it's ridiculous.
So I agree with you in the fact that Bendis writes absolutely horrid dialogue as of recent. I will say that I wouldn't even give Bendis the credit of trying to make some large meta philosophical commentary, because clearly he can't even execute the kind of basic confines of what it means to tell a structurally sound story as of late. And I will say that I think comics, if anything, I come off as pretentious. And I think that comic books do have a place in telling those stories that are meaningful and philosophical. And that's how you get stories like we brought up earlier, like Identity Crisis, that kind of recontextualize aspects of that landscape in a little bit more of a philosophical and a little bit more of a realistic societal context, or at least posing realistic questions to the context of a superhero universe. So I personally think that there are places for those fun stories that can just go out there and really take advantage of the fact that, what happens in these idealistic superhero universes are things that can't really be explored under other contexts. But in the same way, I think that introducing real kind of philosophical and thoughtful themes and questions and allowing to the creatives to challenge those characters with those questions gives a lot of leeway to tell really interesting stories that not only kind of serve as a strong method of getting an idea out in and of itself, but also become the evergreen stories of the industry. You know, you have a lot of comic book fans who talk about Silver and Golden Age stories and how strong they are because they introduced this or they did that. But when you really look at what has permeated the pop culture, what has permeated the zeitgeist, what has permeated the overall consciousness of comic book fans, those Golden and Silver Age stories don't hold a candle to those stories that really push the bounds of what it means for these characters to maintain ideals and for those ideals to be challenged, you know. And we talk about the Dark Knight Returns and how it challenges the kind of mental and emotional state of the Batman and what that means for the character and for his continuity prior and then moving forward. You look at Watchmen as a deconstruction of the superhero genre. You look at Sandman as kind of this analysis on the importance of storytelling and dreams. I think that you can tell those complex stories, but the one thing I will concede is that certainly, as of late, Bendis is not the one to execute those complex stories. So, for fear of coming off as pretentious, I will say that I'll kind of close with saying that I still think that under the right creative hands, that those stories that push those boundaries are more important than the stories that don't.
I agree. And let me ask you a question. What is the best way to obtain that or attain that objective of getting those kinds of stories? I was watching a YouTube video the other day, and it was an individual had put forward his opinion on something that the big two need to do. I think it was what Marvel needs to do, or the big two need to do, and they need to return to. And one of the things that he thought needed to be done, which I disagreed with, was that we needed to return to a day and age where we had the same we needed to return to the day and age where we had the same writer and artist on a title consistently, and you could associate a writer and artist to a particular title. And all I could think about was Tom King on Batman, which was way too goddamn long, and Joshua Williamson on Flash, which I think is a mistake. It remains a mistake. Even if you like Joshua Williamson right now on Flash, he's been on there too long. I think what the industry needs right now is a concerted effort to make bloody sure that you're changing up the creative teams faster. I think Justice League, I long for the days where we keep a writer and no more than 6 to 12 issues on a title and then change it up. I don't know. I mean, I realize you got to look at sales and everything else, but tell every writer saying, look, you're on here for 6 issues and that's it. You're done. And that way they know they got to wrap it up, because what happens is that what every writer does, and I don't care what anybody says, and maybe this is Comic Boom having a conspiracy theory conniption fit, but I think that a lot of writers, they get 6 issues and then DC or Marvel say, well, we'll see. We'll just give you 6 issues for now. And so what do? They intentionally insert 6 to 12 dangling subplots in their story. That way they have to stay on longer because they got to finish the storyline. Or they'll have an opening issue that just introduces the characters. If it sells really well and it's super high, by the time the other data comes in for the sales for the second and third issues, as long as that first opening issue sells well, then they can incorporate the dangling subplots in their second, third, and fourth issue, so that by the time they get to the 6th issue, they can leave a couple of things dangling, and that way DC or Marvel is more likely to keep them on for further 6 issues, and then you end up with this long, drawn-out decompression effect, which ends up being counterproductive in the long run. And it bothers the shit out of me, because I'd rather just have a really good 6, give me your best in 6 issues, beginning, middle, and end. Because I tell you what, without exception, I don't need a cliffhanger. If you write a great story, I'll come back for the 7th issue to start over again. I don't need a single thing dangling. Give me a great story and I'll come back. I don't like an unpopular opinion coming up. I don't like Jeff Johns' final page, always, Jeff Johns always does that. The big cliffhanger at the end. I've never been a fan of that. I don't need it. If you're telling a good story, I don't need the soap opera cliffhanger ending at the end of every issue. I just don't need it. And I would submit that most people don't need it either. If the story is good enough, you don't need the cliffhanger.
So there's a couple of ways that I want to attack that. One, I think that longevity should be granted to those who, have clearly proven a level of quality. And I'll compare these kind of immediately adjacent runs. For example, Scott Snyder and Tom King's Batman. I think Scott Snyder was granted longevity because Court of Owls into City of Owls into a Death of the Family were evergreen stories that I think people will look at 10, 20, 30 years from now and think, wow, those are things that have defined the character and that character's mythos. Whereas Tom King, I would say the first 30 issues of his Batman, out of all of them, there was one truly superior issue and the rest were fine. So I think that they're just kind of there are contexts of the medium that are defined by specific periods in time. The New 52 showed that they weren't afraid to get writers in and out and to move, whether or not that was the detriment of the perpetuated characterization of the existing characters within their universe or not. But in that context, I think Scott Snyder proved that quality equated to the longevity of his run, whereas Tom King, he had kind of been able to capitalize on the fact that Batman was selling well due to bi-weekly issues. You weren't able to kind of get that response until you were literally twice as far through the run as you were in comparison to something like Snyder's, which is why I don't think that Tom King exiting the main title was a product of his choice entirely. And in that respect, I think there are editorial issues, where they are a little bit more focused on sales than they are on quality, because sales don't always equate to quality. And you've seen that throughout the history of the comic book industry, right? You've seen that throughout the history of any sort of media sales. You look at, and I'll relate this to prose. You look at anything that Terry Goodkind has done, and it's all absolute fucking garbage. And his books are often, close to, if not number one, New York Times bestsellers. And we've seen that in the comic book industry multiple times. Sales don't always equate to quality, and that's unfortunate. And unfortunately, editors have to answer to sales. Now, I will say, though, that there is an integrity to a good editor that is able to churn out quality. And I think that eventually perpetual quality will equate to sales. And that's why you have eras like DC's Vertigo, right, that turned Sandman into DC's number one selling comic, right, where Morpheus was able to overcome at the time characters that were 40 and 50 years old, like Batman and Superman, because the quality of the storytelling was so strong. And there's an issue of immediacy, right? These companies want immediate sales, and that's why you see them pandering to markets and to the people using FOMO, fear of missing out, and you cater to this, like I said prior, this sense of immediacy and wanting to get in on it now, rather than saying, let's develop this strong foothold on the industry and on the minds and the hearts of the readers by telling strong stories where they will perpetually increase sales, right, rather than getting the immediate shock now. And we've seen it ample times. You look at Marvel, they've had a history in the last decade in particular about restarting to number ones to get sales, or introducing legacy numbers when people get tired of like the fifth issue 2 in the last 6 years. I think there are a lot of kind of ways to look at that scenario, but in terms of trying to create these evergreen stories and what type of approach we can have at making sure that we're not only appeasing the broad audience, but able to tell these emotionally, intellectually impactful stories, I think you vet your people better. There's certainly an issue with comics being this periodical medium with such harsh deadlines that you can tell that these publishers are hiring people because they can put out work in an expeditious manner rather than putting out quality. And, you know, you've talked about Unkillables, and I'll come out here right now. I don't like Kyle Mustard's art on Deceased Unkillables. I think it's bad. I think it's unprofessional. I think I've seen hundreds of underground artists who generate better art with better kinetic energy, with better panel layout that aren't getting the work simply because they might take a little bit longer to generate higher quality. So I think that's certainly an issue. Just by nature of the fact that comic book deadlines are becoming more and more unreasonable. And you start to see that, for example, in the page counts. We've talked about it before, Boom, and into how they'll solicit 24-page comics and you really only get 20 pages of story because they like to gyp you and count ads and covers as extra pages when we all know this is bullshit. You know, that's one thing that really pisses me off, because it's already hard to pace your comics when they're only 24 stories. But when you start to lessen and lessen and lessen to a 20-page story, when you're charging more money, it becomes difficult to try to focus on quality over the ability to just get the work out. And you can see that, for example, in my review of Tynan's Batman run so far, where I've come off and said the bones of that story are very sound, but the overall execution falls victim to the fact that this guy has 20 pages to tell each issue, and we're waiting a month in between every 20 pages. And ultimately, that in and of itself, the marketing and distribution model affects the pacing. And it's something that, unfortunately, these writers, if they want to be as good as humanly possible, have to be conscious of and have that added stress. And I think that often it deters writers from putting their absolute best into the pages. So I think that, one, there needs to be an overhaul in editorial that prioritizes and is able to plan in advance and allow these creators to take the necessary time to tell the best stories possible over just getting issues out. Because as I become more of a veteran of a comic book reader, I become more and more increasingly frustrated with the bullshit and the periodical nature and how they handle those deadlines. Because to be honest with you, as much as I bitched and moaned about how long it took Doomsday Clock, I'd rather wait 3 years to get a Doomsday Clock than get fucking Heroes in Crisis in a year and pay more money to get a good story than to be disappointed and want to burn issues. You know what I mean? And maybe that's just kind of me letting my pretentious nature erupt over my comments here. But I would rather do quality over quantity. And I think that's largely an issue with the market and with this kind of predicated structure of the industry. Comics is so afraid of change, it's not even funny. And when they do try to change, they never truly allow the time to let that change.
You make an interesting comment when you say that comic books are afraid of change. And in that note, I want to just ask you a question, but I want to predicate it on a number of comments first. And that is that, I'm wondering if there is a difference between the comic book audience and the movie audience for comic books. For example, recently in pop culture news, it has been revealed, and I realize it just might be gossip, but the gossip anyway, I don't know if this is confirmed or not, is that Jane Foster Thor might be replacing Thor in the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 movie, okay? So the fear is for comic book readers who didn't like the all new, all now, whatever Marvel, whatever the hell that was, all new again, all new again Marvel, whatever the fuck, that they're replacing, Hemsworth with the female Thor for Guardians of the Galaxy, just like they did in 2017 when they got rid of all the classic characters. The question is, can the Marvel Cinematic Universe survive getting rid of the classic incarnation of those characters? If we have a Riri Williams Iron Man in the MCU, if we have a female Thor, Jane Foster Thor in the MCU, in comic books, it's clear from the failed 2017 Marvel experiment, to call it that that we wanted to return to the classic characters. We didn't want to lose our classic characters. My question for you is, do you think that the movie-going audience is different? Do you think that there would be a pushback or a rejection if suddenly there's a new Thor in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, if there's going to be a new Iron Man? Do you think that that moviegoers are as much beholden to the superhero characters as we comic readers appear to be to the characters themselves?
So there's a couple of things. There's a couple ways I kind of want to attack that. And one that I think that using Jane Foster as an example, Jane Foster becoming Thor was one of the very few examples during Marvel's 2017 All New, All Different Marvel that I think was predicated on story and was predicated on narrative vision. You can tell that was something that Jason Aaron had planned prior to the situation actually happening, right? Like, and I'll argue honestly that I think that some of the strongest writing in Jason Aaron's entire Thor run comes from the time that Jane Foster was Thor. And regarding the inclination for the movie-going audience to accept it, I think that they will be, in the sense that when the Marvel Universe came to be on the kind of the stage of cinema, a majority of those characters were fairly unknown. You know, we talked about in our last conversation when we had Jace from the Comic Source on, Iron Man was a B-list character. Captain America was a B-list character. Thor was a B-list character. And I don't think there's much debate to that. At the time, when Marvel sold the movie rights to Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, and the X-Men, it was because that was the most profitable decision. You want to know why? Because those were their A-list characters. So I think the movie-going audience has a willingness to accept things that comic book fans might not. So with that being said, in the same manner that I think that Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, and Thor Odinson kind of permeated the consciousness of the cinematic pop culture, I think that if done well, that these new generations are able to do so. As much as I, for example, am not really a big fan of Brie Larson's Captain America film. I'm sorry, not Captain America. Forgive me. Jack Daniels is pretty far ingrained into my head right now. Her Captain Marvel film. I didn't like the movie. I just wasn't a fan of it. But that movie made $1 billion. So what am I to say? You know, clearly there's an audience for it. So in that same vein, I think that obviously if done well, I think the larger movie audience will accept it, because I think that there were also a willingness of people to accept Jane Foster as Thor because the writing was solid and because it was developed properly. You know, I think that out of all of those kind of quote unquote diversity characters of the all new, all different Marvel, Jane Foster seems to be the most widely accepted because the writing was there. The acknowledgement of narrative flow was there. There was a purpose to making Jane Foster Thor, not just because Jane Foster in and of herself was an apt character to put into that role, but because it had a purpose in helping Thor, Odin's son, further develop himself as a character. It served as this blistering stain on the worthiness and how that character perceives himself that allowed him to further develop. So I think that as long as there is somewhat of a narrative reason, that the movie fans might even be perhaps more lenient with accepting something like that.
I think they would definitely be lenient. I'm inclined to think, and I could be wrong on this, because I'm only familiar with comic book addiction, right? Because I have a problem. You know, I see a therapist. I go every Tuesday and Thursday for about an hour. I get therapy. I lay on the couch. I feel much better. Anyways, I have an addiction. It's comic books. I'm not addicted to movies. And I will freely admit that I am much more apt and much more flexible in adjusting to a new approach to Thor in the movies, or to a new approach to Superman in the movies, than I am in the comic books, because I'm addicted to comic books. It is a different universe. There's a uniqueness. I'm so embedded in the DC universe, or or lesser so for me for the Marvel universe, but you get my point, that I do think that the movie-going audience, as popular as the MC movies are, I do think that a movie-going audience, particularly the MCU, I think that they're probably more apt to accept a Jane Foster Thor than comic book Thor readers were necessarily apt to accept the Jane Foster Thor or the Rory Williams Thor. Because I think we comic book readers were older, we're more set in our ways, we're generally more conservative, we're usually alcoholic. I'm just saying, this doesn't help. We have addictive personalities. We probably all need therapy, at least I admit it. So I do think that generally speaking, the movie-going audience, they're younger, they might be naive, they might be millennials, they might be, prone to microaggressions and micro-insults and everything. But, at the end of the day, I do think that there is something about the movie-going MCU audience that I think they're more likely to accept different incarnations of classic characters than the comic book counterparts are.
No, I agree on that. On pretty much every level. Like I said, I think that the willingness of pop culture to accept the B-list Marvel characters as what is to be their A-list, right? Like, I don't think there's any argument that the cultural zeitgeist is far more aware and far more enamored with the event can hear and see us. Let me know if you guys missed anything there. But
I missed a little bit, but that's okay.
The Avengers are now Marvel's A-list.
You froze up on my end here, man. I don't know what other people can see.
Comic book readers, anything right now. Are we good? Everybody good?
You're good now. I can see you now. I can hear you now.
Yeah, I know Tevye said, he froze. I'm wondering which he, Tevye, is referring to. So
I think that was you. Well, you froze on my end.
Yeah.
So.
But point blank is I think that the general cultural zeitgeist of people that are going to see these over the X-Men and the Fantastic.
Yeah, you froze up again there, dude.
Fantastic Four, whereas I think veteran comic book readers see anything. Okay, so so he goes, damn connection. Yeah, you're right. I feel like I'm paying for much more connection than I actually get. So I definitely want to bullet through these last couple of live chats, and then I think our connection is telling us to wrap things up fairly soon. Samoki Dude says he slightly disagrees. Perhaps he's more optimistic, but he thinks that we're in a new golden age in comics. I think in some ways, yes, some ways, no. I think that there's a lot more option and there's a lot more quality out there in the overall space than ever before. But I think that if you're looking at the staples, the mainstays, the big two comics, I think that both publishers, mostly DC right now, are more on a decline than
Yeah, froze again. Well,
you can go to Image. Am I back? Are we good?
You're good. You're just going in and out, dude. It's nothing you can do about it, I don't think.
Yeah, well, I'll speed this up in just saying that in a general sense, yes, there's more out there right now. You can go to Boom, Dark Horse, Image, so on and so forth, and get some incredible quality, some incredible variance in storytelling. But I think when you look at the big two, for example, you can tell that there's certainly a difficulty in them finding their footing. So it very much depends on the context that they're.
Frozen again. Well, meanwhile, back at the Hall of Justice.
What context would you?
Sorry, Dark Knight. You're talking probably right now, but I can't see or hear you, so I'm talking too. It must be chaos for those people that are actually listening. Here we go again. Yes, until Dark Knight returns, I will tell you this. In the immortal words of Mark Waid, when I spoke to him at the Calgary Expo in 2006, he said to me, he goes, every generation of comic book readers deserves to feel that comic books are being written for them. And that's always stayed with me. Welcome back, Dark Knight. Sorry, you were just frozen, so I kept talking.
No, I appreciate you holding down the fort, my friend. Unfortunately,
okay, so
I think I'm paying for much better internet than I actually get. So. Oh God.
Well, we're at 2 hours, so we can fold it up now. We can tone her down, and you know, I can go. You know, I can go binge watch with the wife, and yeah. So you're still frozen there, Dark Knight. I don't know what to say. It's probably a good time to go. It's unfortunate, but I guess we can call it a night then, since I think the freezing is only going to continue. So I don't know. All right, can you hear me now? Or,
yeah, I agree. I'm gonna try to make this as easy on my connection as humanly possible here. I apologize. I know there's a few live chats that we didn't get to, so remember those for the next time myself and my cohort go live. Hopefully everything is.
Yeah, just some comments. Some Okie dude about the Comicscape movement. Yeah, that comic book culture war sucks. Then there's Laura Tevya. Yes, Laura as Wolverine. That's a good next generation hero. Same with Spider-Girl. And yeah, so good comments. And then Tillium says, Disney Frozen song, Let It Go. Yes, we should let it go. To the Batcave, says some Okie dude. Yes, to the Batcave, which has probably better internet than Dark Knight, and I do.
Valid. Yeah, 100%. Before, hopefully, no jinxing it, this gets any worse in terms of my connection. I do want to. Close this out on a somewhat. Are we here? Are we good now? StreamYard, are we gonna let this work?
Yeah.
Before I get fucked up again, I do want to give a brief thank you to as many people as humanly possible. Big thanks to Joe's Geek Show, Paul Baker, Samoki Dude, Taylor Pector, Tevya Smoka, Ant Duhar, Tehillim29, Nerdy Blurb TV. I think I said Joe's Geek Show, but I'm not sure because Jack Daniels is messing with my head. And if I missed anybody, I apologize. One, my connection sucks, and two, I'm a little bit drunk. So I want to thank you guys immensely for showing up and giving us. Okay, I think we're back. Long story short, thank you guys so much for the support, even through my shitty connection that seems to be going on here. If you haven't already, please make sure to like this video if you've enjoyed it, regardless of.
Like the video, guys. We're going to sign off. And thanks for watching. Thanks, everybody, for joining and for us drunk, for streaming along, following us, despite our nonsense.
Channel Comic Boom.
Sorry, you can't hear Dark Knight. Maybe you can still hear me. I don't know. Dark Knight, I'm just talking because you're going in and out. I don't know if they can hear me. I'm assuming they can because I can hear myself in another computer switch here. But anyways, thanks, everybody. I'll leave it to Dark Knight. We can sign off anytime. Dude, it's up to you, Dark Knight. You're controlling the shot here, buddy.
Yeah, long story short, thank you to everybody. Please like, subscribe, all that shenanigans. Go check out Comic Boom, link in the description below. Of course, thank you to my pal Comic Boom. And before the internet likes to fuck up my evening, I think this is going to be Dark Knight Nation and Comic Boom signing out for another fantastic episode of Let's Talk Comics. Stay on the trail as we quest to episode number 50. You guys have a great night and continue being fucking fantastic. Love you guys. Have a good night, and thank you for watching.